play by guitars. So I was playing this third guitar part, this third harmony guitar part or third sax part on the guitar, and I'd go down there every week and I'd play it, and it's like I really couldn't hear what I was doing. I was just reading the music and playing. I never really had a natural, ability to do harmony. So like I could play, I could read the music and play it, but I wasn't really hearing what I was doing. So then we were doing that for like several months, and then one day Gene he goes, okay, he cleared this great big space in the middle of the room, and he said, we're going to have something different, new today. And I thought, wow, I wonder what that's going to be. Well, in walked this guy, and he started bringing in these great big round things, drums, right? And this is weird. I mean, as a child back then, I had never even seen a set of drums, And I watched him set these things up and take up all this room, and as soon as we started playing, I could hear him. I thought, wow, that's what I want to do, I wanted to play the drums after that. I was like, 11 years old, and I just remember it took me a year to talk my parents into letting me start drum lessons. And so right there in Huber, like Jimmy Green, who was the house drummer at Sutmiller's, he was teaching at his house there in Huber, and so Gene, they knew one another. And then I started taking drum lessons from Jimmy up at his house once a week too, with the guitar and the drums then. And it was just a long process of like learning everything, the basic fundamentals of playing the drums. I took lessons from him from the age of 12 to 16. I started teaching when I was 16. Then when I was we were still going to these music contests. I just wanted to tell this one great story. So then I was like competing with the guitar and the drums at a certain point. And then the national contest this one year was in Chicago. So me and my mom and dad, we go to Chicago. We're staying at this great big hotel downtown, way up high on a very big high floor. And we're in the room, and my mom says, here's a newspaper, look through it, and we'll take you anywhere you want to go tonight. And I'm looking through the paper, and I saw Ella Fitzgerald, and I said, that's where I want to go. And then they go, really? That's what you want to do? And I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. So it was just a few doors down at this, supper club. We go in, and it was so weird because it's like me, my mom and dad, and maybe like 2 other people. It was the only people in the whole club. And you could hear the tinkling of silverware and stuff on the tables. That was all you could hear. And then out comes Ella Fitzgerald with just this small, tiny group of people. And I just remember her crying. She was just crying and singing. And I was completely in awe and, enamored by the whole experience. It was just a wonderful, wonderful evening of listening to this marvelous musical talent with the emotion and the love and the tears and everything that went along with it. And then that year I won first prize I won South America, American, and Canada. First drum solo, I was first place. So that was and I was a girl, so it's like, oh my God, boy, the guys had such a hard time with that. I really could inspire guys. Every time I got up to sit in someplace. That was probably maybe 64, something like that.
What year did you go to Berkeley?
71, 2.
Was Ron Riddle there then?
Yes. Wow. I actually shared my first apartment with Ron there.
Oh, yeah.
That's right, I remember that.
Yeah.
Ron had left our band, the Skiffles.
Yeah.
To go there.
Yeah, he
You were
did.
both at Berkeley together, roommates. How cool. Both of you drummers.
Yep, that's right. And then
How cool was that?
I got in touch with him probably a couple years ago. I found him on Facebook. And we kind of talked a little bit about, everything that had happened to us since then, and he did really, really great. Well, he stayed there. I left early to go play with the Roy Merriweather Trio, which in a way was good and in a way was bad, it had its ups and downs, but anyway, so my career as far as the 60 goes, starting out, I started very, very young. Because it was a debutantes, what Lenny was talking about. The debutantes was a fantastic musical cabaret band, you know, of the 40s, and they played all the jazz standards and all the rhythms that went along with that music, the ballads, the swings, all the Latin beats. And, you know, at one point, they had their image. It had to be female. That was their image. And their drummer, Ann Eklund, she had to go to Seattle to visit her mother who had gotten sick. So I was the only other girl in town that was playing the drums, and I was still taking lessons. I was like 14 years old, still just learning. But because I was a girl, I got to have this gig. So I was playing like 9 to 2. You know, I was playing 9 to 2. My dad was taking me and picking me up. This was down at the Green Derby, down at the corner of what's original Jilly's used to be. It was the corner of like 70, right where 75 overpass is on Main Street there. It was just a little corner bar. But oh my gosh, I was just Nina, the piano player. She was just most beautiful, loving, marvelous, you know, person. She taught me how to play, they taught me how to play all the rhythms, all the songs that went with the jazz standards, all the different beats, everything about how to play those songs I learned from them. And it was just such a you know, I have all that in me. It was just such a wonderful experience to be able to learn that. I remember I used to go there in my school clothes, and I'd be sitting there playing, and I'd be like blowing bubbles, you know, because I always chewed bubble gum, and I'd be sitting there, and this big bubble would be coming out. And then Bobby, she'd be on the trombone, and she'd go, and she'd pop that bubble with her slide, you know, and my face would go like red up to here. It was like, they were just so wonderful to me, and you know, that was a great experience. A couple of years, you know, I finally was playing, like going to school, playing, going to school, playing. So, and then like on summertime, I was just playing full time with them, and that was kind of like. And then Jimmy, he started bringing me home because he was playing down at Sup Miller's, you know, just right down the street there. And he started bringing me home because my dad had to get up and go to work like really early, and he was really getting tired. So Jimmy started bringing me home, and then and after that, my career just kind of like took off. I mean, from there I played with, you know, many of the different combos around town, like Frank Kalinowski, Bernie Edwards. I played out the bass a lot of like, you know, wedding receptions and things of that nature. And then I remember one time, I can't remember who it was that died, but we had this New Orleans funeral at the funeral home. And Ann, you know how they play the Dixieland music? That's what they wanted. And I remember Ann saying to me, she goes, if I can't get through this, I want you to take over for me. And I said, yeah, sure, I will. But she made it through. But it was so great, you know, to experience that. The joy, you know, the spirit, you know, leaving instead of all this depression and sorrow. It was, I really loved that. And so, you know, and I went on I just had a great time here I had such a wonderful beginning here with what I learned, and the people here were so wonderful and loving and kind. I mean, maybe part of it because I was so young, but they all treated me with such love, you know, and I just remember it like that, and I don't ever want to remember it any differently. You know, we used to get up at the Forum Club, and all the women and everybody used to get up on the stage with their arms around each other and sway and sing together. There was none of this petty, you know, competition going on. It was just a wonderful bunch of loving people, and it's so different. It got so different, you know, but I that was the best. I mean, I was making more money back then than I think I've ever made, and I was very, very young. But you could do that here then. You could make a living in music because, like you said, there was a club on every block up Main Street. You had the Turf Club, the Green Derby, Sup Miller's, the Tropics, where was that one, the Outrigger? The Brown Derby. I mean, and they were all like packed with this like fantastic music and jam sessions, and you know, people getting up and just playing what they felt, and it was just a wonderful way to begin and start out.
I think the group or the era we were brought up into, the 60s, was a big change, a big movement.
Yeah.
As far as the Beatles had changed everything.
Yeah.
I often wonder what our culture would be like now without the Beatles. But it was a time when the barriers were gone. You're not a woman. You're a musician.
Yeah, that's what I always
And we had the peace and love movement going on back then. So a lot of it was, I don't care if you're black, I don't care if you're blue, I don't care if you're purple, I don't care.
That's true.
I remember Vicki and I were friends from when I first saw her at GBU Hall, and we'd go places together. My buddies would go,
Plus you hang around with my brother.
no, but you first.
Yeah, you met me first.
But,
He used to take us around in his
but I,
hearse.
my friend from Buff goes, is that your girlfriend? Is that blonde girlfriend? I go, no, she's a musician. I never pictured him as a girl. He was a musician.
I love that. Oh,
It was just the way it was, but I think that the culture that we were at, and you're absolutely true, the barriers were going down a lot as far as female rights, blacks' rights. I mean, it was, everybody was equal.
True.
Everybody was equal.
Mhm.
And we all loved each other.
That's right.
Something I'd like to bring up is in the 60s, there were a lot of teen clubs too. There is no place for these kids to
Yes.
go.
Yes.
That was a question I was going to ask.
They had like 5 or 6 of
What were
them.
these teen clubs?
Love
They
Coyote.
They
Wing
were
Island.
And a lot
everywhere.
of times
Skating
they were
rinks.
skating rinks.
Skating
rinks.
We did a lot of
Huge.
battle of the bands at the
Kettering
skating
skating
rinks.
rink.
We had Kettering Skating
Electric
Rink,
Hops.
Icelandia, the
Yeah,
Caverns,
Avondale.
GBU Hall,
That was
Teen Canteen, Sugar Shack, and Fairview.
Sugar Shack.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did Sugar Shack. What was the one in Riverdale?
Yeah.
Teen
And
Club.
dancing, people dance, you know.
The Village.
The Village, yeah.
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 You
My
open up a
neighbor's
teen club, now there's been a couple
I
of
played there
bands,
too.
and the kids are so bad, they had to close them down. I'm not sure what happened with that, but we didn't act like that. And obviously, we were from the drug generation, obviously, and a lot of us did do drugs, and we didn't, I didn't, but we were little Miss Goody Two-Shoes over here, but most of our friends were not like that. Most of our friends were doing drugs and doing things like that, but they weren't mean to each other. There wasn't any fighting and knifing and
No.
all that kind of stuff. None of that stuff went down.
It opened up also, like we had some little places you could just go in. There was a church called the Down There. You could go in
Yeah,
there.
that was downtown.
So you could go in there, play acoustic guitar. Some
Church.
people would get up and show their artwork. Other people would get up and do poetry. And all of a sudden, not only did the music world open up, but the art world opened up.
Yeah.
Poetry opened up. It was all, I love my brother, I love my sister type deal.
The Catholic, the church across from WING where when it used to be downtown.
Cotillion?
Yeah.
But it was just a different, we were going through the changes in society a little bit. The 60s was more of a peace period, more peaceful.
Other than the Vietnam War, that wasn't real
And
peaceful.
you're always trying to help somebody out. You're always trying to give somebody a ride, or if they were hungry, buy them a hamburger or something. I mean, it just-
Especially if it's a good-looking girl.
And we all hung out in downtown Dayton. Every Saturday, we would all congregate in downtown Dayton and sit on the courthouse steps.
Go to Mayor's Record.
Yeah, Mayor's
What's the record
Record.
place?
That's where it was, buy your records.
Yeah.
What's the record place?
What was that called? What was that
Mayor's
called?
Records.
Mayor's Records.
Mayor's Records.
Third is Main Street.
Mayor's Jewelers.
Ted Hunt. They had a record,
Well, if we could continue to get the
Yeah.
introductions.
My name is Jim Foreman, and I'm here on another track. All right, I've been a musician since I got a harmony guitar in 1963. But I was dyslexic, so I held it upside down and didn't really realize that wasn't the way to do it. But I'm coming from another track. Actually, Gino and I met. I went out to Los Angeles and ended up in the music business with, the big acts, and was out there for many years. And my wife and I are both from Dayton. We retired, moved back. We bought an 11,000 square foot church down in St. Anne's Hill, and I very quietly opened a rehearsal stage out here because all of my friends tour out here.
Oh, Gino told me about it.
Yeah, and so my place is a place where big names come to town very quietly, work on their shows during their tours, and then sneak on out, and we managed to run a pretty tight ship there. But we've also brought in some really great house shows, and we brought in some really great local bands and given them kind of a place to do what they're talking about at the teen clubs then, not a bar. It's my house, and I could skirt the law because I'm having a party and there's a great band in the back, and we've got seating for 150 people in the balcony, and I have some of the biggest house shows ever. But I came from a different track in music. I always loved playing. In the 60s, I was in a band in Huber Heights, and I think that a couple of things that have been mentioned here. You asked why Dayton was such a great musical place. I'm going to tell you right now, Gene by Golly Berry. Let's start there, because Gene by Golly Berry was Alan Freed in Dayton, Ohio. Gene by Golly Berry was actually the guy that should have had Alan Freed's career, and we had it. Gene wasn't happy about it. He would have rather been at WABC in New York, but he was here. And so we had Gene by Golly Berry, and he was probably the most musically knowledgeable DJ you would ever want to know. He had a record store, you probably remember his record store back on 3rd Street, right? West 3rd? Yeah. I mean, this guy, amazing guy. And I worked at the Victoria Opera House in the early 70s, and it's now the Victoria Theater, but we had that theater, we had the one across the street, a beautiful 2,200 seat theater that had perfect acoustics that they tore down. Yeah, they tore it down and turned it into a parking lot, and then built a 2,200 seat theater called the Schuster. But I don't know why they did that, because the Palace would have been a much more, it was such an exquisite theater. But we brought in some wonderful shows down there. I mean, I remember us bringing in, for a couple $1,000, we brought in one night Queen in Kansas. Nobody knew who they were, but we brought them in. I remember I ended up working with members of the Eagles in Los Angeles for a very long time, but I remember the first time I met them was a show at Victoria. We brought them in, and it was a $4 ticket, but you got $3 off if you went to the Jane Fonda, Tom Hayden anti-war rally that was happening that day, although there was a bomb threat, so no one got to go to that. But we told them, if you can bring the flyer in, we'll still give you $1 off your ticket. And Jane and Tom came, and it was nice. And Dayton, I'll tell you why it works musically. This is my opinion. Oh, by the way, Gino and I met because he was doing an opening for a movie he did called The Archivist. And I sat down and told him, back in the 80s, I came back to Dayton and hooked up with my friends with a big 3/4-inch video camera, and we started interviewing people about rock and roll in the 50s and 60s. I was interested in people like Tommy Tucker from Springfield, who had a big hit called High Heel Sneakers, local guy from Springfield back in the late 50s. I interviewed Dean and Gene, had a big hit with Tra-La-La Susie back in 1963, toured with the Supremes from Dayton, local people from Dayton. Those were the people that interested me. The bands that I used to watch, the Victorian Skiffle, Vicky and the rest up at GBU. I mean, I was a half a generation behind them, so I was the little kid who, would hook up. My manager would take me to places, the Betty Greenwood's club. I actually played there when I was like 12, right? But I hooked up with Gino and told him about this video work I'd done through the 80s. I wanted this documentary to happen. I think it was because of a lot of factors, but I think it had to do with National Cash Register, General Motors, Frigidaire, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And there were a lot of kids in this area. I mean, there were a lot of families, man. I mean, I had 5 brothers and sisters, and my God, you could multiply my block in Huber Heights, there were probably 40 or 50 kids. And he's right. Everybody had a garage, and everybody's parents could afford the $35 or $40 for a guitar or a set of drums. It wasn't out of reach completely, at least in my realm, out in the suburbs. It wasn't out of reach to be able to get these instruments. I mean, I remember my first bass was a Norma, but I got it from Bernie, and it was $2 a week, And if I broke a string, he'd actually give me one, and I did, It was amazing. There was a lot of support, and I think people forget. I mean, say what you will about Bernie's music, he was a bit of a shyster, but on the other hand, you couldn't get
I gotta
instruments.
say something about that. When I was 16 years old, I worked at Bernie's, and I thought it was great. I mean,
You met everybody there.
I met I was with the drums, I got to exhibit the drums show. He had upstairs in the attic, he had like a total like
Yeah.
cymbals. It was like if you wanted to get a cymbal, you could go up there, you could try out all the cymbals you wanted, play them, and get the one you wanted. And I just always remember Bernie. You know, he always liked these cherry nougat cookies from down at Wright's. You know, I always had to go down and get him a dozen of these cherry nougat cookies. And
And he supported musicians.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
he
it was,
did.
you know,
Yeah, he did.
I couldn't walk into Guitar Center today and say, hey, you know, can I give you $2 a week on that axe? You know, yeah. Later, I was in a horn band in the early '70s, and a big band. We didn't have garage enough for it, right? And we went down to Bernie and just begged him, can we use your, you know, the upstairs? And he gave us the key to the back door, the freight elevator, and we had basically a rehearsal warehouse space up on the top floor of Bernie's when he was on 2nd Street. And, you know, I mean, the guy gave me the key to his store. I was like, yeah, okay, this is great. But I think I've got probably hours and hours of interviews on 3/4-inch videotape. And that's why I'm here tonight, because I hope that you guys will take that interview material and digitize it or do what you're going to do, because I couldn't cut it. There was too much to cut. There was too much to edit. And I started realizing after a while with all the interviews, I just go from one person to another and get the interview. I talk to people, not just musicians. I talk to people about their experiences just being in the audience at the Diamond Club, for instance. You know, I mean, good God, you know, I saw footage of Little Richard walking into the place. Danny, his mom owned the Diamond Club. Danny has somewhere out there, I hope he's got that 8mm film of Little Richard walking in with his guitar player in '64. By the way, his guitar player was James Hendrix at the time, and they got chased out by the dog. You know, it's great material to see. The dog chasing Jimi Hendrix and Little Richard out the door because, you know, they
They were freaks.
It's got footage of Jerry Lee Lewis being at the Diamond Club, and of course, you know, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize that, you know, we started doing big shows at the Palace and the Victoria, you know, and now things are arenas, you know, an Air Arena, big part of everybody's life. I mean, you can't deny that. And it wasn't even that big of an arena now that you look at the places they're playing, but you know, there were acts coming into clubs. The 60s was huge for, you know, I mean, Jerry Lee Lewis was, you know, about 8 years off of his main high, but Jerry Lee Lewis at the Diamond Club, you know, just to walk in and see that was pretty crazy. He was still the killer, you know, and it was amazing that you could walk into a club and see that. And not just rock and roll, but Jerry Gelati, my God, you know, I didn't even know what jazz was, but
That's Gillies, right?
Gillies, yeah, when he was up on what's it, North Main, back on North Main. I mean, you know, I think Miles Davis was there one night. I mean,
George Benson.
George Benson. I mean, God, you know, I look at Gillies today, and I think, wow, you know, I remember when, you know, it was much smaller and much cooler. I mean, it was just much more going on, you know, and.
He was talking about, he was mentioned about when Bernie had Paul Revere and the Ray was down.
Yeah, right.
Because he got a franchise for Vox amps.
Yes, right.
And he had pulled those out, and they were in town because they played that night Kettering skating rink.
Skating rink.
You could go see a national act
Right.
at a store.
Yeah, you can watch them on TV, you know, on the beach, and then Saturday night go down to the skating rink. And the skating rink was a big part of, I think, everybody's life, at least mine, up in Huber Heights. I'll tell you how it went. There was a guy playing the organ at the Huber Heights skating rink. Remember Marty? All right. Here's how it went. You know, you got your skates on if you're a musician. And Marty, I don't know who Marty really is, but here's how it went. You're a musician, and you go to the door of the organ loft, right? And there's like 12 steps up to that's profound, actually. I never think about that, 12 steps. But anyhow, there's steps up to the organ loft. Your level of cool determined how far up the steps you got. You know, some kids only stay down the first or second step, but if you played the skating rink, you made it all the way to the loft, you know, because Marty knew you were a musician, so you could go up there. So there's always this, you know, same as it's always been, this access, you know. But anyhow, I went in a different direction. I love playing music in Dayton. I never got very far, but I got to play with people like, you know, on the same stages with people like Roger Sayer and you know, I mean, amazing musicians. And I want to speak for those people. there are some musicians from this town that are some, Ray Bushbaum and those guys. I mean, there are recordings out there that are amazing recordings that are as good as anything.
Sayers Band, The Intangible Tangerine.
Intangible, well, you had a few of them. I was playing with him at
Three-piece
the,
power trio.
I was playing with him at the Pookie Pookie. I played some of Huber Heights when he was, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But those were the places you could play in this town, you know. But I went another direction. I went to Europe and played country over there, opening for Slim Whitman during the '70s, and then I came back in the '80s and went through some, horrible relationships and couldn't get arrested in Dayton and said, hell, I'm going to Los Angeles. And I went to Los Angeles and ended up having a lot of fun. I retired from the music business. I did production live shows for Brian Wilson and Tony Bennett and you name it. I mean, I got to work with everybody. I worked with Randy Meiser at the Eagles as management and consultant for him for almost 20 years, and that was a great life out there. I actually was able to retire before my dad, who was telling me the entire time that this music thing is going to be the end of you. You're ruining your life. And I beat him to retirement by 4 years.
Right, right.
It worked out. He walked into my office in Los Angeles one day, and I happened to have Frank Sinatra in there because ran a production company. I was vaulting his home movies. And he happened to be there, and I said, my secretary called back and said, there's a guy out here who says he's your dad. And I said, well, he is, because nobody else would claim that, so it is him. And I said, this is going to be great. Give me a minute. So I went over to, I just said to Frank, and he was there with his valet, Tony O, who was a good buddy of mine, and I love this guy. And I said to Frank, look, my dad doesn't believe I'm doing anything out here but selling drugs. He doesn't, he's never understood what I did in the music. He's never gotten it, ever gotten it. He's never, ever understood that there was a real life in the music business. I said, so I really need you to help me out. Frank said, oh, Jimmy, I got this, don't worry. So I called Nicole up front. I said, yeah, have him bring him back, So my dad walks in, and Frank just assaulted him. He goes, here, you're Jim's dad. We love this kid. We love this kid. Anything we need done, this kid gets it done, This is Tony O. Tony used to be with the mob, but now he's with me. And my dad was just, all he did. I never heard another word about the music business after that. After that, he just came home and started telling all his friends that his son ran the career of Frank Sinatra. He had no idea that all I did was vault his films and put them on the video when he needed them for a party.
Right.
But anyhow, that's why I'm here, because I think that there are voices that are no longer here that we need to kind of get those stories, and we're going to have to get them secondhand. I've got some of them. We're going to have to talk about the Lemon Tree and the folk scene here in Dayton. That was another, that was very ripe. I mean, we had John Alden and Sandy recording on Vanguard Records, going to New York and working with Vinnie Bell and those guys. And
Sandy Redford.
Sandy Redford,
Yeah, I graduated.
Right. Well, Sandy and John, it's great stuff. Matter of fact, I ended up bringing John and his old band from the 70s in LA together in the 90s with the Eagles and some guys from the Byrds, and tried to put they tried to make an album out in LA, and they just got in fights with record companies, which I love them for, because we hate record companies. They are the enemy in this business, and I tried to put their record back together. We actually got their record put together, went nowhere because it was the 90s, and by that time it just didn't matter,
Yeah.
Nobody's listening. I don't think anybody's listening much anymore. And if they are listening, they're listening like this. So it's not a real communal thing anymore. So all these experiences that these people are going to tell you about are going to be of, audiences that really, really needed this, audiences that really wanted it. Dayton was so rife with children. I mean, my God, there were just so many kids. I would venture to guess that there were more children than there were, working adults,
Right.
in this town.
It was a baby boomer.
It was just huge. It was just huge. And I think that's the reason. I think that, coupled with Gene by Golly Berry, actually really turning us on to things that, let's face it. That's a little ahead of me, but I got to know Gene. Gene was playing race music on WING. And they weren't happy about it. In the 70s, they brought him back, and I actually had to sit in there and produce it because Gene could be as drunk as Gene could get. And he could talk on the radio, but he couldn't get a cart into the machine or a record queued, because he was just physically unable to. He could talk in a drunk